family, welcome to the Makisode YouTube channel. Today I want to walk us through loops. I want to talk to us about loops. All right, so this is actually something that would help everyone. Yeah, if you're new to crochet, or you've been crocheting, or you have no idea what those terms and parts of a stitch are called, today we're going to be learning that. All right, so if you're new here, go subscribe, right? Yeah, so that's it. So essentially, most projects, like we know, begin with a slip knot. So this is the slip knot right here. I've created one, and then I'm just going to chain up a few. Just going to chain up a few. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to be using these 7 stitches to talk. I don't know how clearly you can see those 7 stitches right there, but this is the front of the stitch. This is the top part of the stitch. So whether it is a chain, a single crochet stitch, a half double crochet stitch, or a double crochet, whatever stitch, whatever height of stitch you're working, you're going to see this as the top of the stitch. So now, counting these stitches, the stitches that I have on here, that's those things that look like heart shapes right there. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? And this is the top part of the stitch. Now on this top part of the stitch, you can see those things that look like heart shapes. You see a loop this way, and you see another loop this way. This loop, right, the loops this way, the ones that are directly facing you, are called the front loops. Then the loops facing away from you are called the back loops. Now, the reason for that is that sometimes I'll call them patterns, call for you to work in the back loops only. So you're going to be inserting your hook in here if it says back loop only, while others call for you to work in the front loops only. So you're going to be inserting your hooks here if it calls for the front loops only. Now, there is something that I like to teach my students, that when you're working, maybe you're working a coaster, you're working something that is a rectangle, and you're working something that you have to work up. And especially if you're working garments that after you walk up, you have to walk back down. I always recommend that they start their foundation row on the bottom loops. So there is a front loop, there is a back loop, and then there is another thing that I like to call the bottom loop, just so that it sounds different from the rest. So these bottom loops is when you see, this is the right side of the stitch. When you turn this whole thing upside down, you see bulges. Can you see those bulges right there? So bulge 1, so let me hold it this way so that I can see clearly. That's bulge 1, bulge 2, you keep going, bulge 3, bulge 4, yeah, bulge 5, 6, and 7. You know, we created 7 stitches, so you should be able to see all bottom loops clearly, as well as seeing all front and back loops clearly. So when your pattern calls to work in the back loops, you know you're working on the loops facing away from you. When they call that you work on the front loops, you know you're working into the loops that are facing you right here. And then when I say walk into your bottom loops, these are the loops I'm referring to. You're going to have to turn, and the only time you have access to this is at the very first row. So after you chain that foundation row, that's when you have access to it. So I'm going to show you an example. So now I'm going to be walking into my bottom loops, and if I'm working single crochet stitches, we know that it takes a chain 1 to turn. So when I turn around, it means I'm going to be skipping this first loop right there, and my first stitch is going to be entering this second loop here. So I will end up with 6 stitches. I've worked my first single crochet, I sight the next loop right there, I insert my hook, work another single crochet stitch, I sight the next loop. That's why you usually at the very first, the foundation row or whatever rows, you need to work your stitches clearly so that you can see all of your loops clearly and be able to enter each one of them when it calls for that. So this is me working in the bottom loops. I'm going to show you a little beautiful thing. So working in the bottom loops enables your work to look the same whether turned upside down or downside up. Look at that. You can see the right side of the stitches because I'm just coming onto this part right here. But when I turn it around under also, you can see that is it showing clearly. Now, this will be different when you're asked to work in front loops and bottom and back loops. So watch this. I have worked a single crochet row. All right, so now I'm going to chain, because like I said, for single crochet stitches, my turning stitch is one, just one chain. Now in here, this is the back. I've turned the back of the stitch because we're working diagonally, yeah, from left to right, and then we're going to turn back and work again. So I have chained, so that's the chain right there. These are my remaining stitches: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I now have 6 stitches left, as I started out with 7 chains. So I now have the choice of either walking into the actual stitches, yeah. So walking into the actual stitches, I'm going to be walking in here, stitch 1, into the actual stitch, stitch 2, walk into the actual stitch. So for this one, once there is no call to walk in either the front loops or the back loops, this is where you walk into. So you walk into the actual stitch. When you walk into the actual stitch, you see that heart shape up there. The heart shape remains untainted, right? The heart shape remains untainted, and this way you have walked into the main stitches. So I'm going to walk now. I chain 1. Why? We're still working with single crochet stitches. I'm now going to walk in the front loops. So like I said, look at it, that's the right side of the stitches, yeah. So you can see the back loops here and you can see the front loops clearly. Now because we're still working, I have chained 1. I need just 6 stitches, so I have to check out very well, just take a good look and walk only in this front loop, because it called that I walk in my front loops only. So I pick up just the front loop. Look at that clearly. So I have the back and the front, and I'll pick up just the front, right? Front loop. So I do not go into the main stitch wholly. Instead, I go in just halfway, deep enough to pick up just the front loop. That's it. I go in just deep enough for me to pick up only the front loop, only that front loop, to pass through just the front loop. Again, just the front loop, right? As you can see, that's the back loop is there and this is the front. So I do that right there. If you need to, slow mute me and slow this video down so that you can see clearly what I am doing. So now I'm going to chain and turn around. This is what you would have when you walk in the front loops only. You would have this very nice ridge here. Now what all of this accords you is different textures to your work, but it's just loops we're talking today. Now I've walked in the front loops. Let me walk into the back loops to show us. I have chained 1 as usual. Your chain 1 enables you attain the height of the stitch. And for single crochet stitches, 1 chain is enough. For half double crochet stitches, you will need 2, and then for double crochet stitches, you will need 3. So, but for now, we're just working loops. So watch. So for back loops now, I'm going to take a good look. Look at that. I can see my back loops clearly. Now, because this is my chain 1, I'm going to ignore that. So the very first stitch I'm going to be working to is this one. So I pick it up from up here. Back loop only. Look at that. The next back loop only. That's it. The next one, back loop only. The next one, back loop only. Yeah, that's stitch number 4. I'm expecting 6. The next one, back loop only. And then finally, back loop only. You can see that I left, look at the front loops all unworked. That's it. So you keep repeating this. If they said back loops, once you chain and turn, you're going to be working in the back loops. But if it had said front loops, you walk in the front loops. So that's about it. Yeah, thank you so much for watching the video on loops. Remember, bottom loops, front loops, and back loops. That's it. Bottom loops, yeah, you'll find that at the base. That's the very first foundation. Now is no longer there because we've walked into it. So you have your front loops and back loops. All right, so that's it. So even that first row, if your instruction had called that from all of the rows are expected to be worked in the back loops, you do not need to work anything into the bottom loop. Always remember to follow your instruction. If your instruction does not say anything about bottom loop, leave the bottom loops alone. All right. However, if you're working garments, of course, as you learn and go ahead, you learn a lot more from us. And then if you have questions, ask in the comments. Subscribe, and bye for now.